Welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community, and the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today, our special guest is Chris Weir. Chris, how are you?
I'm good. Just living the Linux life, enjoying Linux Mint, which is what I'm currently running on the old desktop here, and also the laptop, which I've got over onto the side here. How are you, Rocco? How's life?
I am excellent. I got, just for the occasion, I have a cup of tea.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'm ready to go. Because we're going to talk about that in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
People will undoubtedly know you from or be subscribed to your YouTube channel. They better be, at least. You know, if you haven't subscribed to Chris's YouTube channel, you should go there right now and subscribe. But I'm sure that people have at least seen some of your videos on YouTube, heard your name. And that is where people will know you from. But what would you say to somebody if they asked you, who is Chris Weir personally?
Well, I suppose these days most of my life revolves around my time in the local press. Really, I'm a local journalist by trade, and that's what I've been spending a lot of time doing. So it doesn't necessarily involve Linux on a day-to-day basis, but it does actually include some interesting technology, which I'm sure we'll cover at some point today. But it's a lot of it is still in that sort of community spirit of which Linux resides, and you do see like a lot of parallels. But as well, I do stream a lot of games. I stream a lot on Twitch, but also some of the other streaming platforms. I stream on YouTube and DLive as well. DLive is it's a new up-and-coming streaming platform that's one of the smaller players, but is quite interesting. Again, has an interesting community with it. And, of course, as a result of the lockdown, I've been making a few more videos and enjoying looking at some of the new open source technologies that have surfaced lately. If you look on my channel, you'll notice that I've been looking at instant messengers a lot, because that is an area that intrigues me quite a lot, because you've got all these various different sort of dimensions is in terms of how successful an instant messaging platform is. All in all, just messing around, pottering around, not really just taking wherever the wind blows, I guess.
Well, you mentioned that you're a journalist. Are you allowed to mention for who?
Well, it's just a local paper, the Monmouthshire Beacon. It's a grand old institution, 175-ish years old.
Oh my!
And it's print publication mostly. That's what we really sort of focus on, which is quite nice. So it's a little bit of a shift in speed when it comes to content creation, but I really enjoy the old school nature of it. Like even down to things like the advertising, where it's like you don't have the cookies and the trackers and all of this high tech stuff. You have local businesses that get in touch with the local paper and put an ad in, and it's relevant to the people that read the paper, in that sort of old school traditionalist way. And what is interesting actually about printed media is that you look at a lot of the big papers out there, the national papers, and they are looking like they're struggling. But one of the differences with local papers is that they have this sort of small but dedicated readership that care about their community and what their communities are getting up to, and that's actually very sustainable. It's carried on through the ages. What's interesting about sort of like local press is that it's almost had countless challenges that it's had to face. Like people thought that radio was going to kill it. People thought that television was going to kill it. And I'm sure there are many people that think the internet's going to kill it. And it'd be interesting to see, how it adapts or not to the internet then. We do have a website, but to be honest, it's, unless you actually live in the town, it's probably not as exciting, not particularly exciting, unless you're into, sort of vegetable growing competitions or. We've actually had some sheep rustling around here lately. Quite a lot of it, actually. Quite nasty business. It's actually quite remarkable because it appears that what happens is that these people just get like a big truck and like quite a lot of sheep at a time, like 70 sheep at a time get stolen. And it's like this big old truck comes up onto a farm, loads these sheep, drives off, and then like no one really knows where they go. Like they get like you get these herds of sheep being sold on the flocks of sheep rather being sold on the black market, and it's
that's, that's funny, dude.
Yeah, so it's it's the local happenings. I mean, I got to admit, I do live in one of the more quieter and less exciting places. We don't have many car chases. We don't have many like kingpin drug dealers or anything living around here. It is quite a modest life that we like around here. But I'll tell you what, the local nature is absolutely beautiful. You go for a hike in the woods, or you like your cycling, or camping, or just anything like that. Animal, if you're into your horse riding or your just anything anything outdoorsy. This is a great place to be.
Well, life in the small town is pretty good, I have to say. So, yep, yeah. I agree. All right, what about hobbies, dude? Do you have any hobbies outside of Linux, tech, gaming type thing?
Well, I suppose so. Like, I mean, you've always got to have you've always got to have a presence in the community if you're going to report on it. So, I do a little bit of everything. But sometimes if you ever sort of feel like your head gets a bit clouded or you get a bit flustered and you need a little bit of direction, I always like to make a piece of furniture. Now, I am terrible at making furniture. Like, I'm terrible. I made a little wooden table for my dear old mum to put her flowers on, and God bless her, she used it. But it didn't last the winter. It just didn't, last because what happened, the wood got wet and it was treated, but it just wasn't treated well enough. And then it sort of, wood expands when it gets wet, and then the joints broke, and I mean, the plants were all right, but it's something that I tend to like to do. For some reason, I find it just absolutely clears your head. Like if I've got a big decision to make, or if you feel a little bit of the weight of the world on your shoulders or anything like that, for some reason, I recommend it, you guys try. Get some scrap wood, something that you'd otherwise throw out, and just like make something out of it. It's really rewarding, and even if it's a bit rubbish, you've got that practice, you've got that skills. When I made that table, I learned how to make joints better because I made them so badly. I didn't want to make the same mistake again. And I should have used better screws, but I'm terrible for like recycling them till they're terrible. You just reuse them, and I should have used something a bit more higher quality, but. And of course, I'm sort of doing a little bit in terms of photography, which is kind of interesting because photography is one of those things that I do professionally, but I'm more interested in the amateur side of it, because when you do something professionally, you hit a certain, there's a certain level of quality expected of your work, as in with any job, and then when you hit that level of quality, you sort of ship it out the door. Because when it's good enough, right? As long as it's good enough for purpose. Whereas if you're like an amateur doing something, or you're doing something for the true love of something, good enough isn't good enough. You want the best because you're putting your heart into it, your soul, complete sincerity into it, and that's one of the things that I'd like to do. Like I started getting into photography through my work, but. You don't ever, when you're on the job, you've got to get stories out the door. You've got to, there are people in place. Sometimes you're even working with animals, and that's just an adventure all on its own. But being able to go out, particularly if you're going out in the woods, you're going for a bit of a hike or a cycle, and you just get a chance to take a great landscape shot or a picture of a tree or something like that, and just to be able to spend a good amount of time getting that right angle, getting that right framing. All of that kind of stuff, getting the right focus. It's something that I really want to start getting better at because it's, I don't know, again, it's just one of those things. It's rewarding. You have something at the end of it. It's all about, I think this is something that we have through the Linux community and the open source community at large is we like making things. We like sort of having something to show for the work that we've put in. And, yeah, and I think that sort of just follows me through every other facet of my life, really.
Yep. Well, what type of photography do you like to do personally?
Well, I like the nature, the landscapes, really. But landscapes are very, I don't want to say like competitive, but like everyone likes to do landscapes. And from time to time, when we get books sent to us in the office, sometimes to like review, sometimes to have a look at, sometimes just as a thank you gift. And we get a fair number of local photography books. Like a photographer just wants to publicize their work in a lovely, beautiful, printed, book, or get some photographs published, and they look really good. But it's something you want to kind of almost kind of try and beat in a way. Like I suppose I get a little bit of a competitive edge. Is like, well, I want to do something better than everyone else, or I want to get the shot that no one else has. And sometimes it can be it's incredibly difficult because there is so many people out there that want to that want to get those perfect shots. But there are certain landmark areas around and out and about. Every place in the world has them, where there's just countless people, countless photographs of that one monument or that one landscape shot, that one overlook, and I want to sort of go beyond that. I want to find something that not a lot of other people have seen, and then and make it look beautiful.
Yep. Well, I think part of the thing is with landscapes is there's not too many people that would have your landscapes. So you may have seen a mountainside or a field or whatever it may be, but that specific shot with that specific sunset or that is unique to where you are at that moment. And it can be competitive because there's so many out there. But like I said, I think for me, like I like taking shots of like a sunset, say, but I do it because I love seeing that. Like I'm not out there posting it for everybody to see. Like I'll throw one or two up on Instagram or something like that, but like nothing it's just more for personal.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to get some in the paper, but I'll tell you what, there was one shot I got, and I did it on the job, so I suppose it counts as a professional shot rather than a hobby. But it was shortly after some floods that we had in the area. We had some pretty startling floods, and there was this one shot that completely summed up the damage that was done, where there was this beautiful little wooden bridge going over a stream, and a tree had just crashed straight through it, and I had to walk through inches of mud and slipping all over the place to try and find that shot. And it sort of punctuated the stories that we were trying to tell about the floods with that particular shot. And it feels strange to say that it was a bit rewarding, but it was that one shot that summed everything up incredibly nicely, and it was just so startling just to see this. It was just something that people used and something that people liked, and it was just it was torn down, and it was quite something.
Plus the effort that you put in getting it too,
yes.
Probably meant a lot too.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. I wasn't even wearing the best footwear, to be honest. Those I needed to give those shoes a really good scrub. It was quite a trek.
All right, so you are a big tea drinker, and I know this because you put a video on your YouTube channel, one of your YouTube channels. You have two. You have more than two?
I have quite a few. Yeah, I have. Okay. I have the Chris Ware Digital channel. That's where all the Linux tech stuff goes. That's where most people will know me from. But in order to sort of keep everyone happy, sometimes people just watch me for the Linuxy stuff, and that's all well and good. So I don't want to like burden people or fill up people's subscription feeds. So I do have a channel called Project Chronicle, which me and some friends have got together. We've had it for years. No one watches it. No one likes the videos on that channel, but we make them anyway because they're so much fun, and we make them for ourselves. And if you want an example of why making content for yourself is just, it's so fun and so rewarding, even though people don't watch it, Project Chronicle, it is nice. And then I have Gaming with Werewolves, which really is just a sort of, it accompanies my Twitch streaming more over anything else. It's just a place to put highlights and, some live stream stuff and, gaming bits and pieces, but really Twitch is the sort of the place to go for that. And I do have a sort of a newish channel, or a channel that I'm resurrecting, called Ours is the Theory, which is similar to what I do with the gaming channel, but it's for more like TV and films and stuff. And it started with Game of Thrones, and we just ended up making, or me and some friends, but largely, me made quite a few videos talking about Game of Thrones, guessing the ending, all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of great. It was a lot of fun to put that channel together. But as new shows come out, and as new, because TV is great these days. I mean, have you seen the stuff on Netflix and all the others? All the other places. It's like there's some good TV out there. So it's new, it's up and coming. Not many people know about it, so it's a little bit of an exclusive for this show. But yeah.
Well, we'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes for that, because I'm sure people will want to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, you made this video, and it is, I forget what it was called, how to make a British cup of tea or something
Something like that, yeah.
And I personally, like I said, for this show, have a cup of tea, and I drink tea normally at night. Like if I'm editing a show or something like that, that's when I'll grab a cup of tea, or because most of the time I drink coffee. But my friend Zeb, he made sure to tell me that I wasn't really drinking tea until I got the tea from, the UK. So I did order Pluckley tea bags from, because this was his recommendation that I try, and they are excellent, and that's what I have. But what tips do you have for me for making a cup of tea?
Well, tea is an interesting thing because it is part of the British way of life. Like, it is embedded deeply within our culture. And I suppose that from an American point of view, tea, the way that we experience it, is probably quite exotic and quite interesting and all that kind of stuff. But from the British point of view, we see it more as like a warm blanket, something that's familiar. It's it's an extension of comfort, really, more over anything else. And it's one of those things that we share. Like, if you go around to someone's house, you have a cup of tea, and it's because it's sort of a very standard way that most British people drink tea, is that it sort of brings us all together. And it's that sort of kind of tea is the way that I made it in the video. And yes, we do have milk. I know that for the most teas out there, that you don't actually drink it with milk. But for the British tea, which I believe most people sort of refer to as the English breakfast tea, but we just call it tea. It's the standard nature of it, and the usual way of making it is the comfortable thing. So I suppose the tip about tea that I would say is not to overthink it. I suppose in many ways it's an analog to the American cup of coffee. Like, it's how we see the thing. See the same thing in terms of, like, you might go and have a coffee around the coffee shop with with friends and associates, and it's that common coming together that makes it what it is as well. I mean, I enjoy a cup of coffee myself too, but to be honest, from what I understand, British people do coffee wrong in the same way that Americans do tea wrong. It's
You may. Well, in this video, you called, I don't put any sugar in my tea. I put honey in my tea, which is probably not the best way to do it either. But you called putting sugar in your tea, I think it was barbaric and savage.
Savage.
So do you have like a favorite type of tea?
Honestly, no. I think when we're talking about tea, in terms of the basic British cup of tea, as long as you get a decent brand, you're generally in the right ballpark. I think the Queen likes to drink Twinings, which is a good brand of tea, which is a real nice cup of tea. I had PG Tips today, which is quite a run-of-the-mill brand. It's not particularly fancy. The last time I had a fancier cup of tea was some loose leaf tea that my brother brought back from Mauritius, which was a vanilla tea that you don't drink with milk. And that was really delightful. It took a little bit more effort brewing because it's loose leaf. So you have to, you have to put it into a little pot. You have to let it brew. And then you have to get a little sieve type thing. I forget the name of it now. That's very shameful on my part. And then you have to just, and you drink it, and it's more of what the, people around the world would think of as tea, because the way that we have tea when we add the milk and we do the tea bag, that generally is a very Britishy thing. I think in most other parts of the world, you will have tea that is without milk. And this tea from Mauritius, it was vanilla tea, but it was so soft and it was so like it didn't need milk either. Like it felt very, very complete, just as the tea on its own, which was absolutely delightful. But really, I think tea can be done in fancy ways, which is, and I think maybe the tea drinkers in the States were probably more adept at the fancier types of tea, because I think with British tea, it is a bit more run of the mill. It is a bit more, every person's type of thing. My feelings on sugar are probably more personal. Like we do have people, plenty of people in the UK do have sugar with their tea. I mean, it's not, it's fine. It's acceptable. I
thought it was hilarious, dude.
I can't say I've had honey in tea. I've had honey and lemon before, but I've never had honey and tea.
You should try it.
Yeah, I should. I do actually have honey, so there's no reason why I shouldn't. It's just, I don't know. It's just something that I don't think of to do, really. I'm sure most people in Britain have probably tried it, and I do like honey. Honey's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful, but I can't say I've tried it recently, at least.
So everybody has different contacts, obviously different family members. In my situation specifically, I can talk to one or two people about Linux, and that's it. Everybody else looks at me like I'm crazy, and they don't know what I'm talking about. So what about you? Are you in a situation where you're able to talk to a lot of different people about Linux, or is it just a few?
Well, quite a few. In my day-to-day sort of person-to-person, there are only a handful of people. My dad used to work on servers, so he's quite familiar with Linux. My brother does. He's doing a computer science degree, so he's familiar with it as well. But interestingly enough, my mum, who's probably the least technically adept, actually uses Linux Mint and just loves it. She is not a big Linux enthusiast. She just doesn't like the nonsense that Microsoft keep doing. She used to be on Ubuntu Mate, had a great time on Ubuntu Mate. I moved her over to Linux Mint. I got to admit, part of the reason is because Linux Mint just looks lovely. It's just the new theming, and the Cinnamon desktop is wonderful. And she's had zero problems with that. And it's really been put through its paces. I mean, she's been doing all the kinds of video conferencing stuff through the lockdown, and keeping up with the family on on things like Skype and that kind of stuff. And zero problems. It works well with printers. It works well with. She's done Zoom meetings and Skype calls and all this kind of stuff. Zero issues whatsoever. So I do find a fair number of people, especially, but it's the online community that I suppose we get into the really in-depth conversations about Linux. But that is kind of interesting. I do think a lot about Linux, like what would Linux look like if it hits the mainstream, and I suppose in reality it has hit the mainstream in Android and I suppose Chrome OS, although I don't know if you'd call Chrome OS mainstream. It may do one day, but and Chrome OS based on Gen 2. So, you want to run Gen 2, run Chrome OS.
Yep. I think that it has hit the mainstream, just people don't realize it.
Or people don't like the way that it's hit the mainstream as well. But we do have to, it's almost one of those things of be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And, okay, so the Linux that hits the mainstream, it's not necessarily privacy and freedom respecting as we'd like, but it still has its benefits. Like, it's still Unix-like. It still fits within, it's compatible with our systems. It's easier to port from, for example, Android to Linux than it would be to port from Windows to Linux. Although that being said, Windows to Linux is actually really good these days. I mean, you look at technologies like Wine and Proton. Wow, they're amazing. Yes. In fact, there are countless cases where a game works better through Proton than its native port. And in some cases, there are games that work better through Proton than natively on Windows. So I like to play old games. Like, to me, the golden era of gaming was about 2000 to 2010. So that decade, I really love a lot of the games there. Maybe stretch it a bit earlier, 1999, 1998, because then you got the original Deus Ex there, which is a wonderful game.
Yes, it is.
A lot of those games work much better on Linux than they do on Windows. In fact, some of those games, they're incredibly difficult to play on Windows. In Steam, you can just fire them up in Proton as if it was a native game, and it works perfectly. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. And I often think if really sort of the true sort of hopes and aims that we have isn't necessarily Linux per se, but the idea of having our software be operating system agnostic. So, to have a piece of software that works on, Windows, Mac, Linux, and the BSDs as well. Hell, even Haiku. Let's throw Haiku in there. I mean, that's a charming, operating system there. Because, we don't know what the future holds. 20 years' time, Linux may be something that we don't want, or it may no longer be privacy or freedom respecting. But if we do have a good set of if it's the norm that an application can move from operating system to operating system rather seamlessly, then maybe in a couple of decades time, BSD will be the one that's seen as the privacy respecting and freedom respecting distribution. We just don't know, but it allows us more choice. It allows us to keep our options open, and also it allows us to introduce free and open source software, freedom respecting software, to people on other operating systems without having to haul them over. So we can sort of, bring them in gently. So, maybe we'll get them using Firefox. We'll get them using things like Audacity or OBS, or even, GIMP or Krita or LibreOffice or any of these things. And of course, we're not even talking about applications that work online. For example, WordPress. I mean, WordPress owns the internet, and it's an open source piece of software. I know there will be many people out there who criticize WordPress for its various technical shortcomings, arguably legitimately. It depends what you need it for. It is a hefty piece of software. I write my website actually HTML straight onto the website, and it's easier to do than you think. I mean, HTML is a wonderfully easy language to get to grips with. Although, isn't it not technically a language? It's a markup protocol, or I don't know what the technical thing is, but it's it's easy enough to do. But yeah, so the philosophy of free and open source software, it permeates the entire tech world in a fantastic way, and it goes beyond Linux. But Linux is a great base for the kind of stuff that we want to do, because I think the aim for a lot of people is to have the top to bottom freedom respecting as much as possible. I mean, we do obviously have to deal with pragmatism and also, like, the number of people who are running only truly free software. That's a tiny amount of people, because I mean, you got to look at things like Wi-Fi drivers, graphics drivers, all sorts of stuff. I mean, playing MP4, codecs and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a world of absolutes. It's not do or die. It's shades of grey, and every day we can get a little bit better and or move into a freer and more ethical direction, I guess.
Yeah, everybody has their standard of where they set that in open source, using proprietary software, using open source software, and but there's varying degrees, and everybody falls in somewhere in that path. You have people that are only going to use open source software regardless, and that's just the way it is. But like you said, that is a small minority of people, and I'm not trying to downplay that, because that's a personal decision, and that's something that I think is should be valued, is somebody making that choice, and maybe even sacrificing some of the things that they would want to do by saying, I want to run just open source software. But for me personally, I'm more of on the pragmatic side, where I'm just going to use the best tool for the job. I want to use open source software for everything, but when it comes down to it, I use the best tool for the job.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, in reality, that's what you've got to expect. And when you're actually selling things like the Linux distribution, what you don't want to be selling, you want to be selling a list of features, not a list of things it can't do. With me, I move around a lot, and I think people, lots of people do. I mean, I use Dropbox. I'll tell you one thing that I really like, and a lot of people do. I get a lot of funny stares in the open source communities. I'm really a big fan of Google Stadia. the gaming platform.
I am too.
It's wonderful, right? And video game ownership is an interesting concept, and I think in some places it's worthwhile. But a friend of mine gifted me a game on Steam the other day. It was Dirt Rally, really good game, quite a lot of fun. 150, I think it's at least 100 gigabytes, if not more than that. I think Hitman 2, one of my favorite games, that's about 150 gigabytes now. It's all well and good owning your games, but where I don't have the hard drive space to actually it's
You are not lying, because any new, especially the AAA games come out, they are at least 100 gigabytes, mostly 150, and then on top of that, they have continual updates that are 30, 40 gigabytes in size. So yeah, so you have to have a tremendous amount of space on one drive to have enough space for your games, and then talk about having a backup just in case. Like, there's just no way. And you had mentioned Stadia, and it's not a popular opinion, because people look at it as being Google, and they maybe, I don't know if they want it to fail or if they just expect it to fail. I've heard so many different things about how they're going to discontinue it after a while and you'll lost all your money. But think of the possibilities that it opens up if they get this right, and you can get rid of, not get rid of, but you can utilize any computer to play a AAA game. I mean, the possibilities are awesome in my mind.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, it opens it up to people who can't afford high-end hardware, and I think that's something that's definitely worthy of note. And to be honest, when I put money down on a Stadia game, I consider it a rental. That's fine. I mean, to be honest, am I going to get that? Am I going to get that invested in owning Assassin's Creed? I mean, it's a fun enough game, but it's not a game that I'm going to die for or anything like that. And like for another example, which it's a bit strange that I'm as excited as I am about it. Monopoly came out on Stadia, right? But the fact of the matter is, right, you can just play Monopoly with people, like you can play it either, couch co-op, or you can play it online, or all that kind of stuff. It's just so easy. Like, you don't have to, like the convenience is that, like it is a big factor. And it was £7.50. It wasn't that much money, like £7.50. I mean, it is Monopoly, so you wouldn't want to pay through the nose for it, but like, that's not a bad deal. It's a good version of it as well. And as well, if you run it through the Chromium browser, that's an open source client. It's more open source software on your hardware. Basically, it turns a AAA game into a website. That's really what it does at the end of the day. And when I want to sincerely support gaming developers and creators, I'll go on itch, which is a wonderful little gaming indie platform. The games they're not 150 gig on itch. They're some of them are like 10. The itch platform itself, it's an open source platform. It's everything, that's the place where my heart is, and there's also quite a lot of good open source games over there on itch as well. So it's definitely worth, having a gander at that. If you're looking for something that's free and open source, then there's plenty of options there on itch. But for everything else, Stadia's pretty good. And also, of course, Steam. I mean, there are a lot of I've only got a 1 terabyte hard drive. There's only going to be so many 100 gig games that I'm going to be able to put on that. I think I've got like a second one around here somewhere, but am I going to have to faff around with a second? Yeah, I'm probably going to. Anyway, it's more work and faff, and it's all right for people like me and you who may be a bit more comfortable getting under the hood of a so to speak, of a computer. But for most people, it's to be honest, I see it's the inevitable future of it, if I'm completely honest, because the thing is, it eliminates any kind of technical support, really, or it eliminates 99.9% of technical support. It means that more people can play and don't have to worry about updating hardware as well. Hardware is going to be something, it turns the PC into a gaming console. And that's to say that if Google Stadia even stays on PC, people might be more inclined to play it on their smart TV or their tablet or their phone or anything like that. And again, it just opens up the market, really. But yeah, no, I'm quite fond of Stadia. It's and you don't even need that good of an internet connection, really. I'm on a pretty standard rural internet connection, and it plays fine. Like it really does.
Well, I know that the internet connection is one of those things that people talk about, and that's valid. That will be valid for some people. I know ownership of games is talked about, and that's also valid depending on your stance. But think about, not only does it eliminate the hardware issues, but it eliminates the operating system issues too.
Mm.
So how many times have you heard people talk about gaming on Linux, and that's the one thing that holds me back, this game or that game. Imagine being able to play, obviously they don't have the big library right now, but once it grows and once they do get that big library, imagine removing that obstacle from people wanting to switch to Linux, but they can't. And if they could do it through Google Stadia, man, that would be absolutely awesome. We've took quite a few off trails here and rabbit holes we went down. We do have to talk about where you started with computers. I'd like to know, what was the first computer that you used?
Oh, okay. Well, we're going back into very early memories here, but my first computer was a BBC Micro, which was both wonderful and a living nightmare. Because the thing is, I loved the actual machine itself, and it got me to grips with BASIC. So the first programming language that I became familiar with. But also it had this horrible way of playing games. You had to put them in an audio cassette. So you had these audio cassettes. The games came in audio cassettes. You plugged the audio cassette into the back of the Micro, and then you played the audio cassette, and the data from the audio cassette would then go into the Micro, and about 6 minutes later, if the tape wasn't corrupted, half the time it was, but if it wasn't, then you got to play your Tetris or your Qubit or your whatever. And it was magic to me at the time. I was barely walking, and this was wonderful stuff. But I got to admit, when the what are those, the not the 1.44 discs, the ones that came before that, the big black square ones, when they came along, oh, that was a godsend, because it was an end to that horrible problem of because cassette tapes, man. I'm glad we moved past them, because it's not a happy childhood memory,
right?
But and beyond. But yeah, that was I can't even remember how old I was. It was like 1, 2, 3. But yeah, BBC Micro. I mean, some of my friends who were more onto the ZX Spectrum, because I think that was the competitor of the day. The BBC Micro was considered a bit more of a posher computer, but we just got a really good deal secondhand on it. So it was nice. It was a good machine, apart from the tapes.
Very nice. So I guess we're going to have to fast forward a few years. But when is the first time that you hear Linux?
It was about 1997. And I was it was sort of told, I think my dad might have mentioned it, and I think I just picked it up because it was if you wanted to get into computers for a living, that was like the thing you needed to know. You needed to know how Linux works. You needed to know how to operate Linux. So I got a version of SUSE on the cover of a Linux format or one of those similar type of magazines, and it's an absolutely charming way to start my journey into Linux. And I put on SUSE, came with the KDE desktop, and it looked a lot better than Windows at the time. Actually, I was actually quite impressed with how it looked, but it was also very difficult to get connected to the internet. But it did come with a lot more. It came with a decent number of games out of the box. We're not talking good games here. We are talking like your Minesweepers, your Solitaires, and all that kind of stuff. But it had a decent collection. It had Blackjack on it as well, actually. And I didn't, that was my introduction to Blackjack. Which I don't have a gambling problem, by the way. Just but it sounds like I'm starting a how did I get into gambling story. But no, it's but it has some great games on it. It has some great applications on it, and that's where it became a part of my life. Became something that I knew I wanted to know and get to grips with. But shortly beyond that, it did become a little bit more difficult because I wasn't really that, I was still quite young at the time. I was still, single digits in terms of my age. So I did drift back to Windows. I think it was the games that did it, but also that it was a system that you could ask help for. Like if I wanted to go with Linux back then, I had to go at it alone. And I suppose you're asking a young child to do something that was kind of a bit. But that being said, there are actually some people who do watch my videos who are about 12, 13, and they're out there installing Arch. So,
yep.
It's kids are smarter than you think. But I came back to it when I got my first own computer, like the first computer that I owned that wasn't like a family machine, and I put Fedora on that. That was Fedora Core 6 or so, something, and that served me well. That was a good workhorse for university stuff as well. So did me essays, played some. I got some games running on it as well. But that's when I started distro hopping. And then I went from Fedora to Ubuntu. I think I went to SUSE for a bit. I bounced around all the major ones. And I think I did settle into the Ubuntu a little bit for a while. I actually even tried some of the BSDs at the time and actually sort of quite liked them. But yeah, I think I settled on Ubuntu, and I think it was a little bit like the community was what sort of attracted me. It was a big community, really. It wasn't, the others were great, and I could have just as easily settled on one of the other distributions, all things considered. But it was Ubuntu, and I pretty much settled on Ubuntu. I not settled on Ubuntu because I still, basically distro hopped even a little bit to this day. Actually, I was trying out the latest Fedora on one of my ThinkPads here. And that's really good, actually. That's quite nice. And I like the new Ubuntu as well. The 2004.
2004 is amazing.
It looks really slick. So, and I think nowadays we're at the stage where it's like, do distributions really matter that much? I mean, pick Fedora, you'll do whatever you want to do on it. Pick an Ubuntu, you'll do whatever you want to do on it. Pick an Arch, you'll do whatever you want to do on it. Yeah, admittedly, some of the updates are a bit bigger on Arch, which is one of the reasons I don't tend to run it, because it's just like every couple of days, it's like, 1,000, it's like a gig of download, stuff, which is, it's all right if you've got the time and patience and bandwidth for it. But at the moment, I'm just running Linux Mint because it's just low maintenance and looks nice. And it's something that I can help other people with. When I recommend a distribution to other people, it's usually a Linux Mint or an Ubuntu. And it's nice to be able to, if I'm familiar with that particular distribution, I can help them if they ever run into anything. But I think we're very much at that stage now. We're like, all distributions are they're good enough. I don't want to say feature complete, because is it ever feature complete? But they're there. And then you've got your snaps, your Flatpaks, and your app images. Fill in all the gaps.
Yes.
And I'm actually a really big fan of those. I know it's in some circles a little bit contentious to say
you're not allowed to be a fan of those.
I can't help it. They've just solved too many problems. They're absolutely wonderful. They they allow you to run. Well, first of all, they allow the developer to actually package software as they see fit. And it's, when you've got the source code and it goes into the distros repositories the usual way, that's all well and good 99% of the time. But for particularly complex pieces of software, and I'm thinking of things like Kdenlive and OBS, where they are complicated pieces of software, like you can get the best experience if the developer does the packaging. And certainly with Kdenlive, which I have seen packaged badly on a few distributions before. I don't blame anyone, because it's a very complicated piece of software, very difficult to package, I'd imagine. I certainly couldn't do a better job. But with Kdenlive, they provide a wonderful app image.
Yes.
And that just is, solves so many problems for me. And I can run it on any distribution. So as much as I distro hop, now it's out of idle curiosity rather than looking for something, in particular.
Well, I know right now, specifically, there's a lot of animosity between which, because everybody seems to take a side. You're either on the Snap side or you're on the Flatpak side. And but I don't see why there has to be a side. I don't see why they can't coexist, and I don't see why they can't be enabled in every distro, both of them. It offers so much to each Linux user to be able to do that. It allows programs that we never had before that we now have as a snap package or as a flat pack. That I don't see where all of the hate is coming from. But
no, I suppose. I think it comes from the fact that we're a community of rather strong-headed individuals, and I think that it's just in our nature to argue like that. Really, I think it's very much it's our personality thing than actual anything to do with, and that's not a bad thing because it means that everything is challenged, everything is battle tested in the debating arena, as it were. But I'm absolutely with you. Throw them all in snaps, flat packs, app images. I mean, heck, I saw on Twitter that flat packs were working on Windows. You can get flat packs working on Windows. I mean, I'm told it's a bit of a hacky solution, but yeah, flat packs on Windows. What kind of magic is that?
That's sorcery right there.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
All right, so we've mentioned all of these other distros that you've tried. Which did you settle on? What distro and desktop environment is your personal?
At the very moment, but to be fair, anyone sort of watching this in the future could very well be out of date. But I am settling on Mint. And there's a couple of reasons. Partly it's low maintenance. These days I'm distro hopping a little bit less, or when I am distro hopping, it's on an old, secondary machine. And I do like my games, and I do like to keep my save games for a while. Sometimes I'm playing like a really long campaign of something, and just nuking and paving is just something that's a bit more of a, an imposition these days. So at the moment, I've settled on Linux Mint because it's got a 5-year support cycle. And admittedly, I think Ubuntu has a 5-year support cycle as well, although sometimes they've been known to extend the LTSs. But it's only Ubuntu, as I understand it. I think with your Ubuntus or Ubuntu Mates, they're at 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
So that's that's not really too short. But I went for something that had a nice long support window. Something that looked kind of nice. I really do like the Cinnamon desktop, actually. It just looks absolutely wonderful. I understand that some people don't like it because it's a little bit too Windowsy. But my problem with Windows was never how it looked or how it behaved. It was much more on the freedom respecting side of things more over anything else, and the lack of choice and the lack of modularity and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, with Linux Mint, I mean, it just does what it just is. It's just simple. It's low maintenance. It just works straight out of the box. And I do quite I do lend a fair amount of weight to the out of the box experience. The fact that I can actually get a very a system that's suited to me up and running in like an hour. Like that's I mean, it's I can understand the appeal of like your Arch method as well, where you've got a completely bespoke no bloat or anything like that operating system that's as streamlined as you can imagine, that you can get a boot up time in 5 seconds, all that kind of good stuff. And that's great. But I suppose these days, I'm just looking for something a little bit more, just straightforward, simple, and low maintenance really. There's so much exciting stuff in the software world when it comes to Linux.
Yep.
That I think the distro, the day of arguing over distros is done really. It's pick what you want and let's move on to the software, I guess.
Have you tried the Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix?
I gave it a passing look, but I think it was a little bit early in the development process to really give it a solid, to really sort of devote an opinion to it. But how's it looking now?
Well, so I actually have not tried it recently. So I tried it probably when you tried it. So I tried it when it first came out, and it was a little rough around the edges. But I'm hoping that the developers can take that and run with it because Joshua actually comes on to the Biddle live stream that we have sometimes, and I'm wishing him the best because I think there is a section of people that fills a gap for, that they like Cinnamon, and they would probably Let me say that again. They like Cinnamon. They probably would enjoy being on Ubuntu, but there's not that option right now.
I definitely think there's a market for it. And if it's one of those distributions that, if it's one of those Ubuntu spins that can get a really good community behind it and a good set of, sort of chaps pushing it, I mean, it would be one that I would give a serious look to as well. I really do like the Cinnamon desktop. I like the fact that it has that nice balance between, it gives you a fair amount of customizability, but it just doesn't overdo it. Like if you do look into Mate, you do look into Xfce, again, wonderful desktop environments, but you can change everything to do with them, and it's a bit much in some cases. Like, to be fair, when it comes to a problem, like if you've got a problem with a window manager, switching out in Xfce is a piece of cake. That's great. Cinnamon is like, I would say it's the middle ground between Gnome and Xfce, right? You've got Gnome where you can generally change very little, and I like that approach to a degree as well, because it's nice to have that kind of standard approach. It's one of the things that Windows does have going for it, is that you can give some instructions over the phone. Click on this, click on that, go to that menu, type this in the search bar. And Gnome does standardize the user interface to that degree, and that does make it accessible to more people. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got Xfce, where you just do whatever you like with it. Like if you've installed Xfce just as a package out of the box, it gives you nothing. It might give you a taskbar or something if you're lucky, but you're putting that thing together yourself, and you know the way that you want to, and that's great as well. And you can you can switch out any of these individual components. But sometimes it does, like Xfce does feel like an amalgamation of components rather than a completely sort of sealed desktop environment, and that's in many ways that's a good thing. But Cinnamon is the middle ground where you've got where it is a complete desktop environment. You're not really expected to switch out components, but you do get a fair amount of customization within the desktop environment itself. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that middle ground. It's easy, and I guess that's what I'm looking for. Even though I suppose I'm perfectly capable of putting together a really solid Xfce desktop and spend an afternoon picking out themes and all that lovely stuff, Cinnamon and just falls out the box looking lovely. So,
well, I have said the same exact thing for the longest time, but with the exception to it as being, I've always used KDE as that other option. So Gnome was always that option that had just very little settings, and that was out of the box experience, where KDE was the toolbox of everything that you could just change anything and everything about the desktop. And yes, Cinnamon always fit that bill for that perfect match of in the middle, where you had just enough of the right settings that you needed to change and not too much where you got lost in it.
yeah.
So I totally agree. All right, so let's get into your YouTube channel, dude. How do you go from being a Linux user to saying, I want to put out content about Linux?
Oh, okay. Well, I suppose back when I started doing YouTube, it was a lot more, let's put out a whole bunch of videos and see what sticks. So I was making videos talking about all kinds of things. I can't even remember most of them, to be honest. And one of the topics was Linux. And those were the videos that got traction, so I just made more of those. It's really quite as simple as that. I think I found a community that was receptive to what I had to say and what I had to show them, and it sort of came, it sort of grew from that, really. I can't even remember the other stuff I was rabbiting on about. It couldn't have been that interesting because it's all fallen by the wayside. I don't even think any other videos are on my channel now at that time, but it was. I think in a lot of cases, I just wanted to sort of share the enjoyment I was getting out of discovering all this wonderful stuff on Linux, really.
Well, I went back through your channel, and I think you started the channel in 2012, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But your first video on the Chris Weir digital channel is not till 2013, so there may be some older than that are not there. But let me ask you, you named this, Chris Weir Digital, or I don't know if that was the original name, but people out there, they make ridiculous names like BigDaddyLinux, stupid names. Why did you choose to use your name and make it like a personal thing like that?
Interestingly enough, actually, it's not a particularly interesting story. It basically is you can't trademark a name. So it's like I knew I was gonna if I wanted to like sort of put out some branding and all that, if I wanted to using my name, I knew that a company couldn't come back and be like, we're going to sue you because you chose the wrong name for your blog or something like that. Whereas nowadays, like I suppose it was a little bit more of the Wild West back then, where we didn't really know where all the copyright stuff was going to go. But because obviously you don't get that, you don't get too many, you don't get much legal back and forth when it comes to people who've named their blogs this and that or whatever. But it was something that was actually a concern of mine at the time, is that if I named it the Linux Man or something like that, there might be another Linux Man who has a magazine or a website or something else, and then I might end up either getting sued or having to take my channel down or something like that. So it was really just a playing it safe kind of thing, really.
Well, I think that that's a huge problem right now for anybody starting a Linux channel, because pretty much every name out there that has to do with anything Linux has been taken or in some form. So I don't envy anybody trying to start a channel and naming it right now. But looking at your channel over the years, the progression of it, 99% of your videos have a thumbnail picture of you in them.
Yes.
And it's not like, like some YouTubers will put out like thumbnails with them with crazy faces and trying to clickbait it all. Yeah, exactly. But yours are mostly just a normal picture of you, a snapshot at that moment. Is there a reason why you did that?
Yes. I mean, it's quite a well-known phenomena in the YouTube world that thumbnails with faces in generally are more approachable. People click on them more and that kind of thing. And I think there might be some evidence somewhere to suggest that extreme facial expressions might further that. But I always kind of felt, well, it just feels more genuine to just take a still from the video somewhere. So yeah, a lot of it just comes from the gut feeling that you have, that you just want to sell the video as it is, really. So yeah, I usually just take a still. On rare occasions, it might be a still from a section of it that I didn't use or anything like that, but it'll usually be something that's in the video in one capacity or another that I've used.
Well, I think that is a perfect analysis of your channel. And again, there's a lot of times where I'll say this, but you can't stress enough how important it is to be genuine. And true to who you are when you're making stuff, because so many times you'll run into, not so much in the Linux world too much, but in YouTube in general, you'll run into people that are just, you can tell they're not into it. They're just doing it for whatever reason, whether it be trying to get famous or trying to make money. And the people that I love watching is the people that are genuine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that applies almost tenfold on somewhere like Twitch, because with Twitch you have a bit more of a back and forth with your audience. So if you're not genuine, I mean, to be honest, what's the point? Like it's just like recreational lying or something. It's.
Yep.
I mean, I think in some instances where you get the fake people, I think what's kind of happened is that they've at one point, like they made videos as they wish, and they got some traction and they made some money through AdSense or Patreon or however it goes. And then they realize that what they did for fun is actually become a job, and it doesn't no longer matter if it's fun, because you have to then pay the bills, and then you're trapped in this hellscape of what you thought you enjoyed but now are compelled to do, and you can't escape from it. Otherwise, lest you go back into unemployment and find another job. And are people going to hire someone that was a YouTuber not too long ago? It's or a Twitch stream or anything like that. And maybe some people even go quite far down the line of, well, if I've been a YouTuber for 5 years, is that really like something you can put on a CV, or is it something that employers are gonna be interested in? And you find yourself trapped in this world where you're compelled to make videos and pretend to enjoy something and pretend to still be in love with this group of people that just to get money out of them. And it's like, it's a dystopia. It's in many ways, I feel quite sorry for a lot of these people, because they've trapped themselves in what they thought was going to be their dream job, only to realize that they've got to now sort of claw every dollar or pound they can just to make ends meet. And YouTubers do not get paid anywhere near as much as you might think. I mean, ad revenue goes up and down and up and down. You could be earning 4 times in December what you would be earning in January or February. In fact, there are like 3 months of the year, the winter months, January, February, March, where you just basically don't earn anything from AdSense, because it's the lull after Christmas, and it's having to deal with these ups and downs and changes of YouTube policy. It's one of those things that really hit home, and for me as well, because there was a period where I was doing YouTube and stuff like that full time professionally. I say that like there was work on the side, but it was usually related to making a video for someone else or some such thing, and it did fall down that way. So I managed to get lucky in the sense that I'm a local person. They want local people to work on the paper, and I managed to find a good fit there. And I'll tell you what, ever since I demonetized my channel, I've enjoyed making videos so much more again. Like, I get that some channels require a little bit of funding to ease the costs, and there are bandwidth costs and server costs and all that kind of stuff. But for me, who's running just a basic YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff, being able to do it just for the fun of it and to not be directed by ad revenue or Patreon or anything like that, it just allows me to make stuff that I want sincerely, genuinely. And if people don't watch it, they don't have to watch it. Like, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't impact me. Maybe I could get a few more viewers if I did Fortnite or, I don't know, drama. Maybe I could pick a fight with someone or something like that. That'll get me loads of views. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't make me any more money, or it wouldn't improve my life, and it would probably make my life a lot worse, in all honesty. So, to be honest, at the end of the day, I could sell myself as, oh, I'm just a genuine person, I'm a good guy, I'm a nice guy. But at the end of the day, I'm genuine because it's just better for life. It's better for your mental health. It's better for just enjoying life a bit more. Really, there's no point in being disingenuous or false or anything like that, because it's just. No, you just end up a Fortnite streamer or something like that.
Well, being genuine is hard for some people because they get trapped in that, like you said, and that makes it difficult. Like, where do you go from there? Like, how do you get out of that? And maybe the takeaway on that is that you do just demonetize your channel and get away from it and just make the content you love to make.
Yeah,
because that is genuine.
But absolutely.
Chris, you've made tons of videos over the years, hundreds, especially with all the multiple channels counting in all that. Do you have any like special memories, something that maybe was rewarding to make out of those videos?
Yeah, there's I don't know how you feel about this, but there are a set of videos that I make that I go back and watch. And I know that for a lot of people who make YouTube videos, they don't like watching their own stuff. They get the joy out of making it and putting it out there and other people watching it. But there is a set of videos that I do go back and watch. It's on my Project Chronicle channel, the channel that no one else watches. So I'm probably my own biggest fan.
That's not true. But anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, there's a series of Garry's Mod videos. I don't know, are you familiar with Garry's Mod, the game?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And me and some friends have played Garry's Mod throughout the years now, and we record ourselves playing it. We'll cut some highlights out of it and just pop it on the Project Chronicle channel. And the amount of fun playing that game with friends is and has been just over the years is memories that I treasure. I genuinely do. And I go back and watch those videos just to relive. I say relive, like we still play Gary's Mod from time to time, but like those moments that we share, sometimes the chaos and the panicking and the fun and games and all that kind of stuff. And those videos, they're what YouTube truly means to me. They're what making stuff truly means to me. They're what, like, the friendships that we have, like that's what it means to me, solidified into a video series. It absolutely, like, I get so much fun. I get an indescribable amount of fun just going back and watching those videos, making those videos, editing those videos. And I don't care if I'm the only person in the world that watches them, but I love those videos so much. And I recommend, I'll recommend people go and check them out to see if they enjoy them at least half as much as I do. But yeah, like I feel kind of lucky that I've actually managed to find this peculiar amount of enjoyment out of my own content, because I know that a lot of people just can't stand hearing their own voice or seeing their own face or anything on stream. And I got to admit, like it's not something I enjoy. It's something that I tolerate as well. And I know that, like, I know people keep telling me that I've got a lovely voice and all that kind of stuff. But of course, when we hear our own voices, we don't hear our own voices. It's all a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, the whole Project Chronicle channel is my heart, really. It's my relationship with my friends, and it's so, like, near and dear to me that yeah, if anyone wants to see me at my most genuine, that's probably where they can find it.
Very nice. You're right. There's a lot of people that don't, for me, I'll just take me, for example. I don't like watching my own videos over again. I can't do it. And I don't like hearing my voice over again. So if I've edited it once, that's basically the only time I'm ever going to watch it again. Yeah. But it's great that you have found a certain set of videos or a certain environment that you enjoy making, so much so that you enjoy watching it over again. And that, I think that comes down to more about memories of having it happen than actually doing the video itself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And yeah, it's like home videos, I guess, in that regard. But I don't know, like the more modern version of home videos, or the more, like, I don't know,
the next generation of home videos. All right. So what do you think is next for your channels?
So at the moment, I am particularly interested in instant messaging software and some of the philosophies of how open source software exists within the world, and how it can make the world a better place, and what that might look like. Because, as I said earlier, Linux going mainstream, it looks like Android, it looks like Chrome OS, right? But that's not to say that like open source hasn't done wonders for the world. I think a very good example is the Signal instant messenger, which is touted as an incredibly secure and private instant messaging platform. It has some criticisms you could level at it. It requires Google services, so if you don't like Google, you're going to be a bit out of luck. It is centralized, which has benefits to it, but it also has some negatives to it. You have to use the client that they provide. However, when they want to run something down the pipeline, like a security fix or a new feature, it's a lot easier from a centralized piece of software. But one of the things that, regardless of any of that, the encryption algorithm that Signal has given the world has been used in countless other products. It's been used in WhatsApp and Silence, which Silence is an instant messenger that uses SMS text messages rather than the internet, but it does use the Signal encryption algorithm. So even though Signal has its own philosophy, its own way of doing things, the open source software that it's provided to the world, the open source algorithm, has been used in WhatsApp and now is on billions of phones. And it's made a piece of software that billions of people use better, more secure. Okay, it hasn't completely fixed the problem. It's not a perfect fix by any stretch of the imagination, but it's 10 times better than what it used to be. And it's 30 times better than being unencrypted. So that's just, one example of how open source software has permeated the mainstream in ways that we might not necessarily have imagined, but has definitely made things better. But also, of course, I was looking at Session, which is another instant messaging platform. It's an app that you download, and you communicate with people like any other instant messaging platform. However, the big issue with any of those kind of instant messaging platforms is getting people on board with it. Like, it's getting someone to install yet another app on their phone, getting used to using it, and quite likely in many cases you'll be the only one that they talk to on it, which is not necessarily an attractive proposition when you're trying to sell open source software. So I'm very interested in how, in ways to solve that problem. In rather than just sort of browbeating people to use the software that you want them to, what are smarter ways that we can actually engage with people? So another piece of software that I am particularly interested in is Delta Chat. And Delta Chat takes your email and fashions it into an instant messaging UI, either for your phone or in an app image on the desktop. So what you've got is the ability to communicate with anyone with email, but in a neat little WhatsApp style application, which actually also has end-to-end encryption. Now, end-to-end encryption isn't perfect on email because there is issues with metadata, but again, it's better than it was. Like, you've massively improved the situation, and it's all done with open source software. And again, as I was mentioning with the Silence SMS instant messaging software, it's just a way of encrypting text messages. So you're applying open source software, again, into infrastructure that we already use in our day-to-day lives, but improving it using the free software and open source philosophies. So I think on a philosophical basis, I think that's sort of what I've been talking about and what I'll be talking about on my channel for a while, is just how we can... it's all great living in our community and having the best software that we can use and having all these great stuff that we can do. But what's it worth if we can't give it to the world? What's the point in having, all this, opening up our code to the world if the world isn't going to use it? And you don't want to be too evangelical about it. You don't want to, be like, use Linux here, use Linux there. You don't want to, be that guy that's always going.
Yeah, you don't want to be that guy.
But there are, like I say, there are smarter ways. There are cleverer ways. There are like, even the likes of YouTube are using, they developed the WebM codecs and all that kind of stuff. Again, open source permeating the mainstream in ways that are, they're not necessarily visible, but they're definitely useful. And it's, it's making the world a better place one step at a time. I suppose the thing that really interests me these days is the philosophy of actually making the world a better place, and improving computers and digital infrastructure with open source stuff, but in ways that actually do, practically, genuinely do make the world. It's all well and good. You could have the best instant messaging platform in the world. It could be completely secure, privacy respecting, all that kind of stuff. And if no one uses it, then
it's worthless.
It's worthless, yeah. So, it's definitely, it's the problem isn't technical. The problem is people,
Yes.
and it's always user error at the end of the day, isn't it? But
I would like to ask you what your thoughts are on other YouTube alternatives like LBRY. Most of the time, when you talk about these services, a lot of the reason behind, and I'll give you like just my personal opinion, the reason I'm not on other services besides LBRY, because I'm on LBRY, but the reason you don't switch totally to them is because the people are not there. There's not enough of your audience over there. What are your thoughts on the other services? Like you had mentioned, different live stream alternative, DStream, I think it was, or something like that.
Oh, DLive.
DLive and LBRY. What are your thoughts on those type of?
They're needed, and it's nice to have an alternative. I put my videos up on PeerTube, which I think is particularly great because it works in the Fediverse. It works with your you can subscribe to all my channels on Mastodon, and it uses peer-to-peer and all that kind of stuff. But again, it doesn't get the same views that YouTube gets. Now, I like PeerTube and I like LBRY and I like to see them developed and I like to see them become bigger. But going back to the smarter ways that we can increase, user adoption of free and open source software and all that kind of stuff. I'm quite interested in the things like Invidious, which take the YouTube content, but run it through a free and open source, can host on anything you want front end. And there are certain issues with that. So, for example, it doesn't necessarily support the content creators as well as if you were to watch it straight on YouTube. So you're not getting those watch time minutes or ad revenue or stuff like that, which do support creators. But if you are a free and open source software advocate that wants to enjoy YouTube, things like Invidious are I suppose they're a middle ground. They are that filter that that do provide video content, but not necessarily in the YouTube ecosystem. Again, not an ideal solution, and it comes with several caveats. But if you do want to watch content that is on YouTube but not on YouTube, these kind of things I think work quite well. There's also a couple of other projects that I'm quite interested in, Bibliogram and Knitter. Bibliogram is a free and open source front end for Instagram, and Knitter is a free and open source front end for Twitter. And those are quite good because you can subscribe to Instagram feeds and Twitter feeds with your RSS reader. So I think that's things like that are quite good. That you don't necessarily. I think in a lot of ways, like the free and open source solutions, they go to the problem rather than expecting the problem to adapt to us. So, for example, when it comes to video games, we don't necessarily, or the Linux way of thinking or the open source way of thinking, isn't necessary to expect games to suddenly start porting to Linux and start demanding developers to start porting to Linux. It's great when they do, but I think that it shows I think that it shows the strength of our community when we go out and we solve that problem, when we develop the tools to meet in the middle. When we develop something like Wine, we can then play Windows games, and I think that's great, and that's the open sourcey way of solving it. It's not demanding that they come to us, it's us going to them. And I think things like Invidious, Bibliogram, and Knitter do the same thing in that same spirit, is that we don't go out and demand that people change their behavior. We'll just find ways that we can satisfactorily go to those platforms and engage in ways that are privacy and freedom respecting for us. And that's great because it allows the most amount of freedom for the most amount of people. Someone wants to publish stuff on Instagram, that's great. They get to publish on the platform that they want to publish on. I don't want to use Instagram. Well, that's fine. I'll view through Bibliogram. So everybody wins, right? I've got I get to view nice photos through a free and open source platform, and the photographer gets to publish to whatever platform they would like. I mean, I would imagine that when it comes to Instagram, for example, if you wanted to get your photos seen in front of as many eyes as possible, there aren't going to be many places better than Instagram. Like if you have a self-hosted solution, sure, that's ethical and freedom respecting and all of that, but you're not going to get the same exposure than if you get your photographs out there on Instagram. So I like a lot of these approaches to meeting in the middle because it allows people to do what they want to do, and it allows us to engage in a way that suits us. So everybody wins.
I think that is an excellent way to look at it. That is so opposite of going out where some people will just go out and just ram Linux down your throat, and that never solves anything, never brings anybody to Linux. Meeting the companies or meeting the people in general that are using these services in the middle is an absolutely awesome idea. I'm not completely familiar with any of those three, Invidious, Knitter, or Bibliogram. I would like to know more about them. So if you say you use Bibliogram, are you able to reply to people?
No, it is just you receive the content.
Right.
With Invidious, they do show not only the YouTube comments but Reddit replies as well. So if you're more comfortable on Reddit, then I believe your comments do show up underneath the Invidious videos there.
And Knitter is the same way. You're not able to reply.
No, it is just a front end to receive.
Still awesome ideas. I think I am going to check into all three of them.
Well, actually, there's a video on my channel about it quite recently. So
I did see that. I didn't watch the whole thing yet, but I did see that it was on there. So the oldest video that you have on your channel, I think it's titled Google Drive for Linux. Back in 2013. You talk of how you use Google products, and you talk about Google Drive for Linux in this video. And if you follow your channel, you kind of like gravitated towards the position you are in today, where you're searching out these open source things for specific problems for you. What was the key factor in this kind of shift from using Google type proprietary products to this whole open source front end?
For me, the concern with Google largely revolves around their monopoly. What I am deathly scared of is that as the internet becomes so dependent on them, that they have this massive amount, they become the government of the internet. That's sort of my biggest fear. I think a good example is actually when Google bought YouTube. They were running YouTube at an incredible loss for the longest time. And you know, like it would seem that no businessman would look at YouTube as a viable business because it just lost so much money. Yet Google were willing to sustain that. I would imagine because eventually they would hope that it would make them money. And they would be playing the long game for years and years and years. But I suspect part of it was that they were willing to take those costs so that they could have the monopoly over video sharing on the internet. Like that was worth the millions and millions that they were losing. And that was kind of what worried me. It would worried me that Google Analytics was the only analytics game in town, that Google reCAPTCHA sort of it forced Google code onto countless servers and small projects where it wouldn't otherwise be, simply because it provided that essential service that no one else could match. I think nowadays Google perhaps isn't as strong as it is. I think, for example, one of I mean, it does worry me that when we think of, like, when we want to increase our knowledge, our instinct is to Google something. Like Google has become a verb, and it's like or like it seems that the majority of human knowledge is funneled through this one advertising company, and that doesn't seem ideal. It would help if there was competition. It would help if there were non-commercial alternatives, of which there are both, thankfully, but Google still do hold a lot of the cards. I think that it's important that there are at least options. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter that Google is the best at what they do and they're the biggest player in town, but as long as they're not the only player in town, I think is the most important thing here. When we look at the history of open source and the history of Linux and all that kind of stuff, it almost always is the case that the proprietary, commercially developed stuff comes first, and then the free and open source community answers that with their alternative. Sometimes it's better, but it's almost always more privacy and freedom respecting. So it's okay that the proprietary world takes the lead on some things. In a lot of cases, innovation is done there. It's better there, and there might be better incentives for it. Free and open source software solves a problem. Proprietary stuff is out there to try and grab people's attention, grab people's custom, and make a profit, and that will stimulate innovation. Whereas solving problems, I mean, solving problems in innovative ways is innovative, but in many ways, solving problems in and of itself isn't innovative. It's pragmatic. I sort of gravitate away from Google, but the thing is, if Google are the best at what they do, you have to live with that. Like, Google Maps, particularly Google Earth, not Google Earth, Street View. That's the one.
Street View.
Street View is amazing. Like if I've got to, if I'm out chasing a story and I need to find a farm in the middle of nowhere, I know the right turnings to take. Like I can look at that route visually. Like I do use the Google Street View because there's just no alternative. Like what free and open source project can map out the world like that? That's remarkable and bizarre. It's great.
So it's not like you're anti-Google. Obviously, nobody loves that they have the power and the power basically that they have because of all of their into. But there are certain things like Google Maps or Street View or Google Stadia where I think those things are something that I'm not against using, is what I'm saying. I don't put it out there to say, hey, this is the best thing ever and you should use this, but I don't have a problem when people use them.
No. And nor can you. You can't blame someone for using the best tool for the job. It's up to the free and open source community to match that. I mean, I don't know, I mean, I would say I'm Google critical, but the fact of the matter is Google exists as it is. Like it's a thing in the world. My opinion of Google, to be honest, at the end of the day, it's irrelevant. Like it doesn't matter. Google doesn't care what I think about it. But yeah, just as long as we work towards alternatives. Like I suppose another thing that does concern me a little bit is just that Android is on billions of phones. Like it'd be nice if there were more operating systems. And there will, I suspect that there will be. There will come a time. Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be whole new operating systems. Like just a de-Googled version of Android is good enough. And to their credit, Google do put a lot of stuff up into the open source world. Although admittedly, there is a sort of a self-serving reason for that. So for example, with the Blink engine, which again, like the Blink engine, it's a good engine. You can't deny it. There's a reason why it fits into so many of its other browsers on the internet use it. But with that, through that Blink engine, Chrome and Google can define web standards in a practical way, and in many ways they have power that the W3C just don't have. And that again, it's a concern, but it's something that we can only match and challenge and do our best to bring something good to the table, really. And I think we do succeed in a lot of cases. I think Firefox is a really good browser. And I think that there are some interesting projects as well when it comes to other engines as well. I think Pale Moon's a very interesting browser as well. It might not necessarily be up there with Google Chrome in terms of the things that it can do, but I think that it's nice to have an underdog in the ring.
Yeah, and Pale Moon was originally based off of Firefox, and then they basically changed the code so much to the point where it's off on its own. Is there any software, Chris, that is not available for Linux that you would like to see come to Linux?
I feel personally that it serves everything that I want it to do. I can't think of. There was that streaming platform for Steam, NVIDIA Galaxy or something like that. Anyway, I think
GeForce Now, or
that's the one. Yeah, GeForce. Yeah, I think that's it. Wouldn't mind seeing that come. Maybe I'm sure it will arrive at some point soon. But I think for the benefit of other people, it'd be nice to see some of the some video editing software come across, actually. I mean, don't get me wrong, big fan of Kden Live. I think Olive shows a lot of promise as well. And I think OpenShot is quite good for your more straightforward basic stuff. But we do not have a like an Adobe Premiere type thing. And it would be nice, but that's a would be nice. Like it's not in any way a deal breaker for me. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind seeing a Microsoft Office come over. Now, I'm a big fan of LibreOffice. I use LibreOffice practically day in, day out. And if Microsoft Office were to come to Linux, I wouldn't use it. But I do know a number of people that are quite high-level users of Excel and things like that, who would actually, there are some like obscure features in Microsoft Office that have, that sort of work quite well. But again, like we're seeing Microsoft move their Office onto the cloud anyway, so that will come to Linux, no doubt. We've got Microsoft Office 360 or whatever it's called for work. And I have on occasions used it, and it's not bad. It's pretty good. Like it's. I mean, like I said, I do like to use LibreOffice. It's a great piece of software, and I like the app image as well. It's great. But interestingly enough, actually, when it comes to work, I can even do all of my press work on Linux if I were to use my own machines. We use machines in the office, so we have to use the operating system that they provide, right? But here's the amusing thing about it, right? So in journalism, the tradition dictates that we use Macs. They've used Macs for decades. It's just considered the done thing. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it goes back to the day when there was a bigger difference between what Macs could do and what other machines could do, and tradition sort of hangs around. But what is quite interesting is that to put the paper together, we have this piece of software that runs on Amazon Workspaces. So several people can start putting stories on the page. People can put adverts on the page. And you see the paper coming together over the course of a week. It's really quite interesting. It's all done in a virtual machine which runs Windows 10. So I find this really amusing that the sort of honoring tradition, we use Macs, but at the end of the day, we just use Amazon Workspaces with Windows. So what I can do if I wanted to, and I have done it when I've been working away from the office, is fire up Amazon Workspaces in the browser. And you can just run Windows 10 in a browser like that. Whoa, that's mad, that is. So I don't know, does that count as using Windows if it's in a virtual machine? I mean, kind of, I guess, but but it's a really good way of doing it.
If you could, obviously you're going to use whatever work supplies, but could you, if they allowed you to, do your complete professional job on Linux?
Yes. I mean, it's not a complicated, we don't have high technical demands. As long as I can get into the Amazon Workspaces, which puts the paper together, which does use Windows 10. So that's the kind of caveat, but it's not running it as an operating system. It's just running it as a platform to run applications on in a virtual machine, in a browser. So I don't even, how many boxes inside boxes is that? That's and if you're running a Linux distribution in a virtual machine, I don't know, you'd go even further. But if you allow the caveat of just that, the page software, to run in a Windows virtual machine on Amazon Workspaces. Yeah, absolutely, because it's plain text. We work in plain text. So I need something maybe to edit photographs. GIMP, Krita, easily capable enough on that side of things. I suppose Darktable if I needed to adjust color, but to be honest, at the end of the day, you got to take the photograph right the first time. Like, there's only so much you can correct a photograph or edit a photograph. You don't really want to over-edit photographs unless you're doing something particularly artsy, which in the newspaper we're not. We're trying to tell the stories as they are. But yeah, I could completely use Linux. And when if I ever have to work from home or anything like that, then yeah, I will be using Linux anyway. But like I say, it's plain text. Anything that runs plain text, I could do it in BSD, to be honest. Or I don't know, maybe if you get something like Chrome working in Haiku, I could do it in Haiku. So
if Linux disappeared tomorrow,
mm-hmm.
What would you do? Would you go to Mac or would you go to Windows or something else?
I would look into BSD. I think I quite like BSD. The only thing about BSD is the license. I think I tend to prefer the GPL over the BSD license. But it's a preference. It's not a be all and end all. So I suppose is BSD a legit option in this scenario?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I think I could probably get a lot of what I want done in BSD. I'd probably have to sacrifice on the games, but all in all, it seems pretty good. To be honest, I think if Linux disappeared tomorrow, so much assistance would come over to BSD that BSD would be in a very similar spot to Linux. I mean, I wish I had time to look into BSD a little bit more, because the only thing the only thing is the license issue, and I don't mind the license. It's still a freedom respecting license, so. Yeah. So I'll take it. I might have a look at Haiku, but I don't think Haiku would cut the mustard. I think between Mac and Windows, I don't think I have a strong preference, really. I think personally I'd go for Windows, but I don't. And I think that Windows is a little bit more open to open source developers developing on the platform. I think Apple have with their walled garden approach, have on occasions been quite, some might say, hostile to open source developers. And I do know that open source options are a lot more limited on Macs. I suppose. I mean, I've never tried Chrome OS actually. I don't know. Maybe that might be the option. Oh, that counts as Linux, though, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I guess that would count as Linux. I can't, like, that question is so, there's so many facets to that question of what would disappear if Linux went away. So, like, I don't know if Chrome OS would still be here or not. I guess it would be, because Google would still want to have it. So they would definitely make it work even if it wasn't there. So
yeah.
I started using Linux because of reasons like, I could customize it and I had flexibility to do what I wanted with it. Over the years, I have found the community to be the best thing about Linux. What drives your passion for running Linux?
It's absolutely the community as well. Like it's very indescribable in a way, but it's all part of having a meaningful footprint on the world, really, isn't it? The everything we did, like the community itself, is the foundation for which it's all built upon. And it's almost like every person that uses Linux in one way or another is contributing to it. It's the entire sort of systemic approach that open source and free software are genuine problem-solving approaches. They're not designed primarily they're designed to solve problems first, and then they're monetized in secondary capacities, like you might see with Fedora or Ubuntu. But their job is to solve problems. Windows' job is to sell, and they're very good at it. I mean, just look how wealthy Bill Gates is, for example. But yeah, it's the fact that you start off with the philosophy, I'm going to solve this problem, and I'm going to do it in a way that's satisfactory to me and my belief system. And people come together and they share that, and then we've built it, we've built it. And I think that's almost like the premise of the Linux Spotlight here is as well, isn't it? Is that so many people come at the Linux world from so many different angles, sort of bring it together in so many different ways, and contribute in so many different facets. That's truly a wonderful thing. It's an example of when humans come together, build something glorious and something pragmatic and something that we can use, and something that it makes the world a better place, and it's by our own hands. Like, it's not something that's given to us from some higher corporate authority or something that we've had to pay through the nose for. It's something we built with our own hands, with our own minds, and together. And yes, we I know that the people in the open source, we fight a lot, and we argue a lot about what's the best package manager, what's the best distro, what's the best approach here, and what's the best approach there. And sometimes it gets too much, absolutely. But in a lot of cases, it's out of passion. Like, we're not arguing because we are advocating more money for ourselves, or we're not, it's not selfish advocation. It's a genuine, sincere belief in an approach to problems, or a respect of ethics, or a greater freedom, and all of these kind of things. It all comes together. And yes, you've got the idea of community built stuff is satisfying countless people with all different belief systems, approaches, and technical abilities. We succeed at that. It's remarkable. So many other parts of life that doesn't happen. And I think it's a great example how we have just built something great by our own hands, really, and it's the community that does it.
Yep. Well, you mentioned about Linux Spotlight and what the premise of it is. There are so many people out there, like you said, contributing in so many different ways, and yet you can watch these stories of people and you'll hear this person be passionate about this area over here or that area over there, but their story is so similar to yourself, where you can hear these stories and you can say, yes, I do remember that, or yes, that same exact thing happened to me. And I think that's where people get enjoyment out of that, because they don't feel like they're alone in this. You know what I mean? Like there is a community around it. And I will say that for a long time, the community kind of had that bad reputation of being, not so nice. You had mentioned it and you stated it very eloquently that a lot of people, it comes from passion. There is a lot of people that have that passion for it to be right and for it to be good, and that does spur a lot of maybe not. I wouldn't even say arguments. I would say discussions that maybe get looked at the wrong way. There are some that just want to make trouble, and they're very far and few in between. But how have you been treated, Chris, by the community in general?
I have no complaints whatsoever, to be honest. Because I think approaching the situation as I do, with sincerity, and just with the conscious of understanding that we are emotionally invested in it, and to respect that. Sometimes I think that we can live in a world where we're all expected to be robots. We're all expected to take the most brutal of criticism on the chin and be grateful for it. And I think that if we understand that we're all deeply passionate people who care, and we all have hearts, we all have feelings, and to approach that with a very genuine sort of respect for that, I think I think people generally sort of respond in kind. It just feels to me that it's almost like a part of the human condition that seeks to be part of something larger than the individual. And when we sort of can connect that, in that spirit, I think that's when great things happen. Also, I think in a more pragmatic way, when we are a community of pragmatists, even at our most ideological, when we're talking about the 4 essential freedoms and all of that kind of stuff, those are rooted in a genuine sense of pragmatism, and long-term thinking. But I think when it comes to the differences between us and Windows or Mac or all these big corporate competitors, I guess, or I mean, not even competitors, we work with them. But when we're looking at community versus corporations, one of the areas where communities do not necessarily fare well against corporations is that we don't have PR departments. We don't have marketing departments. I don't see many free and open source software projects funnel millions of pounds, millions of dollars into fancy PR campaigns and making ourselves look the best and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, if you think about it, you take a small software project, just for example, Linux Mint. Can you imagine Linux Mint funneling millions and millions and millions of dollars into a shiny advertising campaign to present the free and open source software world in a really slick light? No, we're real, we're gritty, we have faults and we have scars and we have, whereas I suppose a lot of more corporate software sort of seeks to hide a lot of the problems that they have. So I think that the community culture in Linux is much less toxic than the corporate culture up the greasy pole. It's just they managed to hide it a lot better, and they managed to put on a much more presentable face at the cost of maybe a lot of money and, human resources departments and all that kind of stuff. We don't have that. We're raw and we're people, it's almost like one of the reasons why I quite enjoy Mastodon is because it's not funneled through that that sort of prism of corporate sensibilities. It's raw, and yes, it gets like the arguments get ugly sometimes, and sometimes emotions spill over and all this kind of things. But it's real, it's genuine, it's raw, and it's not necessarily for everybody as well. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that's where everybody should be, but it's that genuine human emotion and sincere beliefs in like a better world that drives people. And it comes out in all kinds of ways, and they don't, we don't always end up looking our best, but like, no one ever really suspected that a society of computer geeks would ever really be the slickest presenters of anything. It's we are who we are, and faults and all.
Yep. Well, you touched on the marketing aspect of it, and there's this debate of whether we should be marketing Linux better or should we be marketing Linux at all. What is the point of trying to market Linux? What are your thoughts on the whole? Are we bad at marketing Linux in general, and would that ever come to anything? Would we ever see that year of the Linux desktop?
Well, that's interesting, because it depends what we see as marketing. I mean, we would, if to market on a scale of a Windows, we would need countless amounts of cash, countless dollars. We would to run advertising campaigns, to make deals with hardware manufacturers, all this kind of stuff. I mean, if one thing corporations are great at, is making deals. Like, that's what they do. That's their purpose almost. We are not that, and we're not that by design. So the year of the Linux desktop is much more likely to be the year of the Android tablet, to be honest. That's the closest I think we'll probably ever get. And that's fine, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, we can contribute to the wider world in meaningful ways, just not wholesale. Like we're probably not going to take over the world in the purest sense of the term. Like, we're not going to have, like, a completely free and open source Linux distribution is probably not going to be the de facto distribution for most people. That's fine. I could perhaps imagine a day when Windows will crumble as a distribution and they might switch to a Linux kernel or something like that. And then that might be the year of the Linux desktop. It'll still be Windows on top and Windows in everything, but we are not marketers, I feel, by design. Like when we do YouTube content and podcasts and all this kind of stuff, we are, I suppose, the marketing wing of the free and open source movement in that regard. But then we are just having conversations about not pressuring people to use Linux. Like, what? So it's.
But come on, isn't it exciting to hear things like with the latest thing where Fedora is going to be working with Lenovo?
That is exciting.
To put Fedora on laptops that you can buy, like that. Like, as much as I want to say that, as much as I want to talk about the fact that maybe we shouldn't be marketing Linux, maybe we should or shouldn't be, something like that is super exciting to hear. That people would be able to buy a Fedora Lenovo laptop. Man, that's awesome.
That is nice. Fedora's a really nice distribution. It's like, I don't know why it doesn't have a bigger share of the market. I suppose it's more in corporate environments or anything like that. But it deserves more love than it gets. I think it's really good, and it looks beautiful. Like, it always looks beautiful. Yep. I think the thing is with Fedora, and I know that there are probably decent reasons for that, is that it could really use like a long-term support release, like what Ubuntu does. If they could do it every 2 years, Fedora could do like a long-term release like that. I would be really hard-pressed not to give it a serious go for a good couple of years. And I know that the upgrade process from the 6 monthly versions, generally speaking, is smooth as anything. I've done it once or twice, and it's always gone perfectly for me. If it had that long-term support release, I don't know. Like, I kind of feel like it would be. But then again, I suppose that goes against the point of Fedora. Fedora is supposed to be a little bit more on the bleeding edge of things. So
yeah.
Who
knows? So, Chris, you had mentioned earlier about the reasons why you chose to run Linux. What about the reasons? You touched on it a little bit ago, but what about the reasons of that you still run Linux? Is it the same reasons when you started as now today?
Probably not, actually. That's a very interesting question. I run Linux because it does what I want without any fuss. That's sort of really it. I mean, I do like Linux, and from the systemic point of view, from the community point of view, it truly is where my heart is. But on a day-to-day, very surface level way of thinking, like Linux Mint just works. I can turn on a computer, it works. I can play the games I want. It's just easy. It really is easy. And everyone I know who uses Linux Mint, even specifically the non-technical users, it's easy to them too. Like it's just easy, and it works, and it's fine. Not the most exciting advances, I'm afraid, but it's just like, but it does the job, and it does the job well.
Here you go. If you could change one thing about Linux, what would it be?
It would be I would put system tray icons on the GNOME desktop by default. I know it's a small thing, and I know it can be added with an add-on, but it irrationally bothers me that GNOME took out system tray icons. Right, I kind of get why they did it, and I understand that sometimes they can be overused by applications and they can clutter it up and they don't theme nice. I got all that. But sometimes there are some applications that you do need to keep an eye on regularly, like to make sure that they're working, to make sure that they're running.
Yep.
So it's a bit of an odd answer, I'm sure, but and I know that there are. I've had arguments with people about this who genuinely think that the system tray icons shouldn't have been in GNOME, and that applications that use them shouldn't use them, like they are a fallacious concept. But like, for example, I use Dropbox, and I would want to know if Dropbox wasn't working, because I want to make sure that my files are synced across properly. Or if I'm recording a desktop and I want to make sure that the recording's still going. Anything like that, you do need a system tray icon for. But.
Yep. OBS has a little dot for recording when you're actually recording. Telegram, has your messages in it. Now there is the thing of, if you're using Ubuntu, they do have the dock, which that does do some of that, but some applications don't work with it. So yes, I agree. There should be a system tray of some type.
Because GNOME is a great desktop environment. Like it's so standardized, it looks nice, and it's not Windowsy as well. Like it's taken its desktop paradigm from it's basically taken something that's similar to Android, but made it suit the desktop, and that works. Like the way that the applications are presented, the way that the search is lovely. Like so you just want to run, I don't know, like GIMP or something. You type in GIMP. Oh, it's not installed. But there's an install button right there in the menu. It's great. Like does it matter if something's installed or not? No, because if you look in the same place, if it's not installed, you install it. It's fantastic. Like they've done some great and innovative things with GNOME, the GNOME desktop. But the system tray icons. Oh, it's a little thing.
Wait, so GNOME took a lot of heat over the years for, going from GNOME 2 and then, GNOME 3. That was a huge change. But if you look at it today, maybe you couldn't understand why they went from GNOME 2 to GNOME 3 then. But if you look at 2004's release of Ubuntu with GNOME, you can obviously see it is absolutely beautiful. And they have polished it so much, like all the little things that maybe bugged you before, maybe not the system tray, but all the other little things that maybe drove you nuts are like just being ironed out and gone away. It's a fantastic release, dude.
It really, really is. I mean, it looks nice. And also, like, the whole standardized thing works for a lot of end users. And I'm not necessarily talking about new users. I'm just talking about users that just want something out of the box. It works, boom, get on, to get on with the job. And one of the things I do like about Ubuntu is that they make use of the left-hand side. You look at your screen space and you think, wow, we've got a lot more space wide than we do tall. So it does make sense to have some menu bars, some stuff on the left-hand side. And also a friend of mine who uses laptops quite a lot mentioned to me that he really likes having stuff on the side with a laptop because it's a lot smoother to swipe left to access your icons than it is to like curl your finger down. Like curling your finger down to a menu across the bottom, it's just a little bit of a awkward motion, but you just swipe across to the left, select your application and go. From a laptop point of view, it's quite smooth in that regard as well. So, I mean, and also the standardized desktop layout is perfect. It doesn't happen so much anymore, but there used to be a time when, like, I put someone on Linux, and then like a couple of days, I'd be like, "Hang on a minute, why have you just accidentally moved your taskbar onto like monitor 3 or something?" It's it's like, "Oh, I don't know how I did that. I dragged it, and you can't screw."
Those are
Gnome
real
up,
world
like
problems. So let me ask you: is there any distro out there? You've tried tons of them. Is there any ones out there right now that are like intriguing you? I mean, there's so many different varieties, from like Elementary of what they're doing and Zorin OS of what they're doing. Is there anything out there that you can think of that like sticks out?
I was quite interested in. You don't hear too much about it nowadays, and I should actually give it a look. Endless OS, which is an operating system based on the idea that you do not have an internet connection all the time. So it's designed primarily as an offline operating system, and I think that's a great idea. Because there are not only are there places around the world who do not have reliable internet connections, or where you don't have where you have maybe metered internet connections and all that kind of stuff. But also, if we're serious about like privacy, we do have to re-evaluate our relationship with the internet in general, because if you're using the internet, you can probably be profiled. Even if you've got a VPN, if you could probably identify someone quite close by just looking at the first 4 websites they visit when they open up a web browser. Yeah. Like, I think people are surprisingly, we fit into our routines, we fit into our habits. And I think that when we're using the internet, we have to assume that we're in a public space, because it's just, even with all of the best software in the world, I think the human nature of it just makes behavioral patterns just easy to track across the internet. Fingerprinting, of course, when you've got browser add-ons and stuff like that. So if you want to take a more serious approach to privacy, and me and you probably are not the most privacy conscious people in the world, because we're putting our thoughts out there on the internet. We've got cameras in our house and all that kind of stuff. Like we are probably probably more on the we're open book side of things than we are. But there are people that have that have privacy requirements, or and the rights to privacy, and sometimes the necessity for privacy. And to consider the sort of the approach that a computer shouldn't always be connected to the internet, I think it's a value. It's an interesting approach to take. It's a valuable approach to take. And Linux-based operating systems that are designed so that you don't have to constantly be connected to the internet, I think can provide a lot of value to a lot of people, even if it's even if it's not us. And I think Endless is certainly interesting in that regard.
Yep. We tried out Endless for the Biddle Distro Challenge a few months back, and it is a very interesting. It's not for everybody. It's for a specific use case, but I think it's great at what that use case is for. So yeah. I wish we could like go on and on and on, because this is a fantastic conversation. Is there anything else you want to share with people, Chris?
If there's anything that, in terms of anything I'm working on, or any kind of shameless self-promotion that I should be doing, my website is probably the best place to get hold of all the stuff that I'm working on. It's chrisware.uk. And actually, there is there's a page on that website where I just list a whole bunch of useful software that I think is of interest to people. It's a lot of stuff that I use. It's a lot of stuff that I think is worthwhile. It's a whole directory of useful, mostly open source pieces of software that I think deserve a little bit of a spotlight. And they all solve problems. Some of them are obvious, some of them less so. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to all the stuff that I'm working on, all the stuff that I'm interested in, my website is the best place to go. And I can even give you my privacy policy right now.
What is it?
I don't have any Google Analytics or anything like that. Like it's just all the. In fact, you could look at the HTML code; it's perfectly human readable. Just, Control U, have a look at it yourself. It's no cookies at all. Not first-party cookies, not third-party cookies, not Google Analytics, none of that. It's just a text file.
Fantastic. All right, Chris, I want to thank you for sitting down with me and having such a great conversation. It was awesome. But I do want to thank you for all of the years of content that you have provided the Linux community with. And that covers anything from Linux distros to your thoughts. I love the rambling vlog type videos that you do, the game streams that you do. I just want to thank you for all of that time and effort that you put into it.
Oh, that's very kind, Rocco. And thank you for having me on the show. This is a great show. I mean, you've got some great guests. You had Mark Shuttleworth on a couple of weeks. How do you get him on?
How does that happen? I'm just a guy, dude. I hit record. That's it. We have a great conversation. So there you go.
He's a great dude.
Yep, he was. So yeah, thank you. Thank you again for sitting down with me, Chris.
Oh, no problem. It's a pleasure.
All right. That's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux.
Toodaloo.